the joke that is dividing America. It's the joke that is infuriating the left. It is the joke said by President Trump in his call to the locker room.
I must tell you, we're going to have to bring the women's team. You do know that.
Absolutely.
I do believe I probably would be impeached, okay?
I must tell you, says President Trump, we're going to have to invite the women's team as well. Of course, the 2026 U.S. Women's Olympic hockey team also taking gold in Milan. Now, that joke today, two-a-days Dan, tinfoil Pat, is causing insanity. It's causing division. It's causing typical American culture war fights over politics, and this time infused within the Olympics. And Dan, as our resident correspondent from the left, you can tell us with certainty that the Brooklyn Brunch Crew is really upset over the joke from President Trump.
Oh, yeah, they think it's disgusting. It's misogynistic, sexist, and all the things that are not good towards the women's team. So, yeah, they're very upset about it.
And it's gone everywhere. Sally Jenkins, former sports columnist for The Washington Post, a lady whose name I do not know, over at Barstool, recording videos and making posts on X, all over mainstream media outlets, the sexism of President Trump and the disrespect to the U.S. Women's Olympic hockey team. Now, let's dive into this today. We're going to talk about it throughout the program because I think it leads to some very fascinating conversations. Conversations which began on our pre-meeting call. Tinfoil Pat, two-a-days Dan, and Big Dog Ron. And continued after I hung up my call because my wife overheard us talking and had a lot to contribute to this conversation. My wife, who was a Division I athlete, a swimmer at Pepperdine. And we had a really interesting and honest conversation. And so let's start for a moment with a bit of honesty. Okay, the thing that President Trump is so good at, saying what we all know to be true, regardless of how it lands emotionally. And here are two truths that I want to explore in this conversation today. Women's sports are generally not as good as men's sports. And no one invites the world's dart champion to the White House. What I mean by that is no matter how good you are at something, no matter how much domination you exhibit, some feats of human accomplishment are not as popular as other feats of human accomplishment. And the men's hockey gold is being celebrated more than the gold from the U.S. women in hockey. What I also mean is that sports are inherently, almost, but not always, masculine. Let's explore both of those. And we're going to start with the one that was actually a moment of contention on our morning call. It was made by Tinfoil Pat, and I'll let him make it. And I pushed back, Patrick. I pushed back based upon my other truth. I've thought a lot about it since then, since our conversation. And I want to give you more credit for something that sounds incredibly crass and turns people off, but if I really think about it psychologically, is true. And it is your contention, Patrick, that women's sports are inferior to men's sports.
Yes. I don't think it's debatable. I mean, the fact that, 15 and under boys soccer teams can beat the women's U.S. national team in a game pretty convincingly. The best women's hockey team probably isn't standing up to bantams, and it's just a fact, And we keep elevating. We've been elevating the WNBA and kind of keeping that up, but there's a reason that it's been propped up by the NBA for so long until the Caitlin Clark phenomenon.
And so your contention is because it is an inherently inferior product, it's never going to attract the audience or the respect or the celebration as an accomplishment in men's sports?
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's not as good.
And not be as obviously, I think the word that you're gravitating towards is not be as inherently entertaining. It will not be as entertaining and therefore not as celebrated and therefore not as popular. Okay, I thought a lot about this, Patrick, because I made the argument to you in our morning call that you don't need to pass qualitative judgment on something that is quantitative. You don't need to say that women's sports is inferior to men's sports to show that the audience just doesn't gravitate numerically in a quantitative way. Data available to us, it's just not as popular. But there's something more to what you had to say that really made me think. And that is this. Sports by its very nature, almost but not all, throughout its entire history has been masculine. You know, the Olympics, the original Olympics, was populated among men. It was a competition among men. Sports, on the average, on the whole, and across the long arc of history, are the province of men. Now, let me give you an example that I think is pretty interesting. I was thinking about this the other day. I saw a video on my Instagram reel of some young social media guy talking to the hosts of Paramount's Champions League Soccer studio show. Those guys are awesome, by the way. It's Kate Abdo. I think her last name is Scott now, Kate Scott. It's Micah. Micah's so awesome. He's the Charles Barkley of the set. I just can't remember what Micah's last name is. And, of course, legendary Thierry Henry. And they ask, hey, if America, the age-old question that we've always asked, if the best athletes in America played soccer, would the United States dominate at soccer? And they all dismissed it and laughed and said no. And Thierry Henry, who is like in the world of soccer, like the voice of God, he speaks very bluntly. He was like, I won't even entertain the question. And it got me thinking about that. Not that age-old debate, but it got me thinking about the women's team, the women's soccer team that dominated the world in the 1990s and early 2000s. And those women were amazing, and they were great athletes, and they accomplished something incredible. But we need to be honest about something. They also accomplished that in a field that was not that competitive globally. The rest of the world did not accept women playing soccer as quickly as the often insulted United States of America, the sexist and misogynistic United States of America. We accepted the premise of women playing sports before anybody else in the world, and we got a head start. And if you'll notice today, our women in soccer do not dominate the way they did 20 years ago. Now Germany's catching up. Brazil's catching up. England is catching up. Some years ago, I had some friends from the soccer world in New York moved to England, and they had two sons and a daughter that played soccer. And one of the reports that came back was, man, you'd be surprised how, like, it's not that cool for Zoe to play soccer. Like, in that culture, women playing sports was frowned upon. It's socially not acceptable. It's seen as masculine. It's not a feminine thing to do to play soccer in England. I do think that's changing. I think it's changing not just in England, but in Brazil, in Spain, and all across the world. And as a result, they're beginning to catch up to women's soccer. We don't dominate like we used to because we had that head start. The point in bringing that in is we had the idea of women's sports is a fairly relatively new phenomenon. It's like 100, 150 years old to really embrace the idea of women in sports. Over thousands of years, it has been the province of men. And so sports are inherently masculine. And Patrick is right. In most sports, when women do something that is also done by men, hockey, water polo, soccer, tennis, the product is not as high level as when it is done by men. I find this joke and this entire analysis we've been having interesting because I think it underlies, first of all, I think the joke was innocuous. I want to repeat, I do understand how the women's hockey players would feel. I get it. I think they have a right to feel disrespected. The world is not giving us the attention. So much so that the president of the free world made a joke about us at the same level of the men. And what I'm telling you is that the world doesn't stop at your feelings, right? Like President Trump's joke was leaning into bro culture. He was having a good time. He was impromptu. He was speaking extemporaneously with the men at that moment. And it was reflecting a deeper truth about the fact that there is just more interest in the men's accomplishment than the women's. You can say there shouldn't be, and you'd be right. But I'm telling you why it is. And the truth is, I'm also telling you what is not just an opinion that I hold or an analysis that I'm making, but for the vast majority of people that tell me I'm wrong, I am also reflecting the way they behave. The way they behave. No matter how much Sally Jenkins preaches, she didn't watch the women's game with the same level of investment that she watched the men's. And that's the truth for almost everyone. Unless they had a wife or a daughter or a sister on that women's team, or they have a daughter who plays women's hockey and they invest in particular in women's hockey.